Good evening, everyone in Alberta, Canada, and beyond. It is Wednesday, November 15th, 2023. And I'm Kerry Lambert, and I welcome you to an online webinar evening of solutions for a new Alberta, brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project, also known as APP. APP's purpose is to educate, inspire, and unite all Albertans, businesses, and organizations to protect the prosperity, individual freedoms, rights, and sovereignty by empowering the Alberta government to restructure Alberta's relationship with Canada. Of course, APP is membership driven with a goal of 1 million plus members to help steer the political process. APP memberships are 1 year for $20, 2 years for $30, 3 years for $40, or you can make a donation at albertaprosperityproject.com. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about tonight, too, in regards to the Corey Morgan Ambassador Tour and a couple of quick links that I want to show. But really, we want to get right into this because we were late. It's snowing in Calgary, and I was out shoveling. So with that, I'm just going to say tonight's episode is called Defending Faith, Family, and Freedom with Randy Crosson, who is Executive Director of Freedom's Advocate, a charity funding constitutional and human rights cases and a not-for-profit law firm. Of course, we always have APP's interim CEO, Chris Scott, who will be joining us tonight as well. This is a live webinar, so we encourage you to ask questions and make comments throughout this presentation. Just put 3 question marks before your question, so it'll be flagged and we can quickly view the questions and comments. With that, I'd like to introduce everyone to Randy. Randy provides vision and oversight with the law firm Freedom's Advocate. Together with his wife, Carol, who founded Crosson's Constitutional Law, they've maintained a 93% win rate on nearly 50 constitutional and human rights cases representing over 8,800 individuals and groups. Sadly, Carol passed away in January of this year. She has left behind a considerable body of work, and Randy created Freedom's Advocate to support Crosson Constitutional Law's legacy. Randy was director of Samaritan's Purse Canada for 13 years, and his management experience spans numerous industries over the last 40 years and senior management roles over the last 25. And with that, I will now bring on Randy and Christopher. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
How are you?
Good evening, gentlemen, and Kerry.
Always a shyster.
So it's even less than casual.
It's even less than casual. So, Freedom's Advocate. How do we want to jump into this? Do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about how Freedom's Advocate began?
Well, Carol she went to law school when she was in her early 40s. We homeschooled our kids, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the presentation, and just saw what was going on in schools back then, like 35 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, she went through that. She ran debate clubs for students and won a bunch of awards from that, and decided it was time to go to law school. And so we have a number of friends that are judges and lawyers, and so she just decided to do it, and she did. So for the first probably 8 years of it, she was managing all of the cases with the clients funding it. The challenge with that, of course, is these cases are horrifically expensive at times because you're taking the government to court, right?
Yeah.
And we're also having to turn down certain cases because they were excellent cases, but there was no money for it. And so we started the charity. We tried once prior to that, but CRA didn't like the approach. And so we then redressed it and went back at it and got it listed back in 2021, and have been funding cases ever since. And so it's just needed. The cases themselves are foundational. Every one of these cases that we win set precedent. And so we've been fortunate to be able to also use our own cases as precedents down the road. The winning piece is enormous. So probably about a third of my presentation tonight is going to be talking about winning and the necessity for it. And that's sort of it. Like, we were just really born out of the need to do something about what was going on societally 30 years ago. And just really getting into it full bore in the past little while. So I took over the charity last year. And the intent was for Carol I was going to take over the ED role for the law firm as well, and allow her basically more to slip into a mentorship role. She was getting toward her 60th birthday and really wanted to more so mentor. And she created a methodology of approaching these things in court that's been highly successful.
Mhm.
And so we wanted to expand on that.
Yeah. So
sorry, do you recall anything that sticks out that was going on in society when you first started doing this that kind of pushed you over the edge to start working on the advocacy part?
Well, 35 years ago is what we were seeing happening in schools with the sexualization of children. It was happening back then, more on a sort of individualistic level, depending on the school board or the school division. And, the area that we were in was a backcountry place in Saskatchewan, and we were seeing it happen there. So we assumed it was. I think what really moved it forward just was the free speech more so than any of the others. People that were being stopped from sharing their message. And that, ranged from, groups like pro-life groups, for example. Regardless of what people think about pro-life, they've won some tremendous freedom of speech cases in our country. And if you can win for them, it's a tremendous win for the country. But, I guess we've been watching these sorts of things for the, around that 10-year mark and seeing everything line up politically, what bills were being passed in the House. There's so much that's happened over the past 15 years, for example, that have set the tone for what we're seeing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so for bringing on things like digital currency, all of the stuff that's needed to make that happen is done. And it was done, some of it during the conservative reign, some during, the liberal reign. But, it's a political move, and it's something that can be highly detrimental to all of us. So, those kinds of things it made it that much more urgent. And, Carol was 10 times more intelligent than me. So she's the one that went to law school.
Well, wow, that's something. Early 40s and going to law school. Mm-hmm. I'm in my early 40s still. Kerry's not, but I can't even imagine going to school and getting a degree right now.
I'm not going to law school. No.
Well, yeah, it's tremendous. She did some amazing things during her life. She has impacted thousands of people. Well, her funeral, the day of her funeral, she had 600 people attend the funeral.
Wow.
So she had a tremendous impact and created an enormous body of work that our key counsel right now, who I've hired, is now going over it. And her eyes kind of look like a deer in a headlight when you talk to her right now, because she's trying to assimilate all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to show your webpage on here in case people are interested, and because we have a presentation, and somebody was asking, did I really shovel snow? Is that why I'm late? No, we had some technical problems in terms of trying to upload this PowerPoint presentation, and about the only way that I can actually get it to play will be that I need to obliterate my screen. So Chris is now in control. So I want to have a little bit of control and show a few things. Specifically, we'll have this little ticker going along the bottom. Of course, Michelle showed the website freedomsadvocate.ca, and people can go there and a little bit about who you are, what you do, and of course how it works, right? And I'm assuming in the presentation you're going to go through a lot of these. So with that, I'm just going to hide that because now I have to remove that. Are you okay with going right into the presentation? Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, it's a lot of information. So, and Kerry, I've set it up for me. So there's a lot of clicks. So I don't know. I mean, I'll maybe just say click or something. That's because there's an awful lot of
because
stuff.
I actually won't be able to see you.
Okay.
I know, it's one of those things. So let me just make sure that I've got my screen on. And we'll share that. And you guys can let me know if this does work for you. And with that, we will start that. There you go. Does that look right?
Well, it hasn't jumped to presenter mode yet.
Oh, it's not a presenter.
You're still there.
I'm still here. Oh, so I actually see it. So there we go. So that's actually StreamYard.
You might have to share the other screen.
Because they both show up on one screen. That was the issue that we were running into. So, any thoughts?
Sorry, why don't we just
You know what? We could just do it on the screen. Why don't we just
do it like this? Yeah, if you can sort of zoom in a little bit so that it fills up more of the screen.
Let's do that. Let's see.
The text will be able to be like down at the right-hand corner where it says 100%. Just drag that a little bit to the right, and it'll increase the size of the very bottom right.
Like, how about like that? That
Even
works.
better.
There you go. Even better. All right.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'll jump into it. So, as you can see, there's a charity, Freedom's Advocate, and a law firm. We're in the midst of putting that together. It's going to be a not-for-profit, and it'll be called Legacy. And for two reasons: legacy from what Carol has done, all the work that she's done, and when we're in the courtroom, we want people to think about the legacy they're leaving in the future. These decisions in the courtroom affect everybody for time eternal. And we want to make sure that that's part of their mindset. We've had judges sit on our cases that were ideologically completely opposed to us, but by the time the end of the hearing, we won because we want them focusing not the law on the law and not the issue at hand. So let's go to the next screen. I was just at a conference in the U.S., a legal conference, so surrounded by about 800 lawyers. And it was, it's amazing we have a chart that starts off like this, whereas Canada's founded on the principle that recognizes the supremacy of God and the rule of law. That's amazing. There's not a lot of countries that have that. And of course, the supremacy of God part recognizes the fact that we can't live by an individual's ideology, which is what we're living with right now. It means we need something higher than us that deals with those inalienable rights that all of us feel and sense and know. Next one. Oh, this is going to be a problem.
Oh, that's something wrong with the wording here. Let's just see if I can.
Well, it's because there's a lot of slides like this too, Kerry.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because there's multiple images in them.
Oh, okay.
So maybe I'll just talk through them. So you can see our daughters. There's three of them. You can't see the one. Carol's in the middle. We started homeschooling them back 35 years ago because of what we saw was going on in society. And debate was big. So I stopped winning arguments years ago. All of our daughters were won provincials. They went to nationals on the debate side. And, they had a great time. Do you want to click on that judge picture there and just drag it to the right a bit? Oh, just the judge part. Yeah, him. Then you can see my other daughter. And of course, that's Carol down there. And, while she was working through homeschooling, debate, and everything, she recognized the need of what was going on. And she and I talked about it, and she decided to go to law school. She basically, over the past decade, created a methodology and how to do that. Everybody in law school said you can't just practice constitutional law. Well, you can. It's hard. You need a charity to do it, but it's possible. Yeah. The next slide. And as Kerry mentioned, Carol passed away on January 17th. It was completely unprepared for that. It's like losing your arm or your legs or something. A huge part of your body. Next slide. And so how do we retain a 93% win rate? It's been interesting. Over the past decade, we've been trying to hire lawyers. Lawyers are pretty hesitant about getting involved in constitutional work because you end up getting painted with the same brush as your client. So you might be representing, for example, a pro-life group. Well, suddenly you're a pro-life lawyer. And, that's your cause, whether you believe it or not, right? And that's really not the role of a lawyer. They're there to represent the client and their beliefs and their issues, right? Yeah. And so that was the case up until about October last year, and we suddenly got 10 candidates, 10 resumes. And, that was going to support our work going into this year. And the first lawyer we hired is a lady named Kristen Nicholson. She's a 30-year lawyer, spent 20 years on Bay Street in Toronto. She was a partner for 10 years in a law firm here in Calgary, one of the top 5. She was a King's Counsel, so it's an honorary thing. Next slide. She was also the chair of the Provincial Court Nominating Committee, which just wrapped up. So that's appointed by the Minister of Justice, and she was the chair. Also recommended by the justices and the Justices of Peace, and the Alberta Queen's Jubilee Award. Krista went through the pandemic and just saw what was happening societally and with government, and just felt like she could not keep doing that. Mm-hmm. And she resigned her place earlier this year and just was going to go out and start working in this. She had actually done a case where Carol supported her on it, won her first constitutional case, and they won. And that kind of wetted her whistle. And so about a week after she resigned, a mutual friend put us in touch And we brought Krista on September 1st of this year. We presently have about 3 of those 10 right now that we would love to hire. So it basically comes down to dollars. Next slide. Another thing that leans into this is Alliance Defending Freedom. They're the largest constitutional legal charity in the world. And that's the conference I was at this summer. 400 staff, 2,500 allied, 4,700 network. These are the kinds of things they bring to us. We're in constant contact with them around cases and everything else. So case analysis, strategies, client issues that we're dealing with, any training that we're looking at, expert witnesses is enormous. Of course, they're doing hundreds of cases a year. They're right now in 100 countries around the world doing cases. And, huge network that comes with it. We're looking at building a Commonwealth group within it. So the office that we report to is in Vienna, Austria. And so all of the Commonwealth countries will link to that as well. So it's a tremendous asset for us. Next slide. Okay, on the law firm side, this is where we start talking about, next slide, about the winning issue. So why is it so important? Well, obvious. If we win, it's a precedent and it supports everybody, even the people we just beat in court. When we lose, we've just given the government a precedent and a bigger bat. And, those losses that have happened over the past few years, and there have been hundreds of them. There have been hundreds of constitutional challenges that went to the courts and lost. And those end up being things that the government uses against us in the courtroom as well. Next slide. So this is sort of the heart of it. And this is my role basically in both organizations. We really cannot be about the client or their cause. It's about the charter issue that's before the court. And so we have to remain objective right through to the final. If it makes it to the Supreme Court, we have to try and remove ourselves from that. All of that's very easy to say. It's very difficult to do because you're dealing with people who are probably in the most trauma they've ever been in their life. Their government's gone after them. They've had their bank account closed or something like that, or some local bureaucrat is just making their life miserable, trying to shut down their life in total. So it's very difficult for a lawyer to be around that, to be connected with them and support them and be their closest friend through all of this. So it's very difficult to remain objective and come at this from purely a legal perspective. And so those are the conversations I have with, Krista and any of the lawyers that we work with as co-counsels, is just to keep your eye on the ball, not on the cause or the client, on what the legal issue is. Next one. So for us, just over the past while, we've had 22 charter cases. We've won 21 of them, lost one. Average cost about $45,000. We won last year, $155,000. But the cool thing about that is there had never been a decision on the charter with respect to universities in Manitoba. That decision now, all of the universities in Manitoba are subject to the charter. That was a tremendous win, worth it, but tremendously expensive. Next one. On the human rights side, 14 of them, one 10, one lost, 3 are still in hearings. Average cost about 10. High one was 31,000. About a week after Carol passed away, we won this one. And the lady that we won it for, Carol had actually been to her wedding. We walked with her for about 4 years through this hearing. And, it was a difficult call. Tremendously happy because she won, but very sad about the circumstances. So that was a 90%. Next slide. And this is where we get into the number of people we connect with. So through the pandemic, we probably talked to about 12,000 people. And about 8,800 of them we did something for. Letters, consultations, whatever. Some of them were large groups. So for example, there's 3,500 doctors, nurses, and medical professionals that we represented to the government or before the government in Alberta, like 500 RCMP. Those kinds of things were happening. The average cost about 500. The nice thing about these is we actually never went to court. We won because they backed down. They learned something. We educated them, and they backed down. This is a difficult thing for most law firms to manage because how do you bill out hours for a $100 case to help somebody, right? Mm-hmm. For us, we're funding it through the charity, so the lawyer can spend any amount of time they want to or need to on those files and make it that much more successful. Next slide. So combined with the 95 on the charter and 90 on the human rights, it's a 93% win rate. Alliance Defending Freedom, the large charity in the States, they're sitting at about 81% right now, but that oscillates as it will for us. But our primary mandate for everyone in our charity and our firm is to win. If we can't win, we're not going to go to court. So today we just turned down 2 cases. We're involved in them from the past few days, interviewed the person handing them off to us, the clients. And although those persons have had their charter rights infringed, something's happened, they've done something that just makes it not possible to win in the courtroom. So that's pretty cold-hearted to some degree, but our goal is to win. When we win, we support everybody. If we lose, we do the opposite. Next slide. So her methodology, as I mentioned, I was talking to Chris and Kerry before, we have a couple friends that are judges and justices. And, you know, Carol, when she first got into this, one of the things you recognize very fast is most judges have never sat on these kinds of cases, on charter cases. They do in the States all the time. And you see it whenever legislation's passed and somebody from the Third Circuit, you know, judge thing closes down the legislation, that sort of stuff. It doesn't happen here that often. So a large part of what she had to do was to educate that judge on what the law was, how it was infringing, what his options are or her options are. And, you know, a lot of these cases are 3,000 to 4,000 pages long. And to do that in a way that doesn't insult. One of the other people that spoke into it is a former Supreme Court justice that we got to know. And, you know, those people inputting into the methodology and how you approach it was really important. So the heart of winning here is the client. As I mentioned, you know, we're dealing with 2 of them earlier today, and things had gone wrong. You couldn't win on that case. And clients is pretty tricky too, because, you know, something's happened. Sometimes they're just ripped right off and they're mad. They want to speak about it. They want to do interviews. They want to do all those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. Well, for us, if we're going to take you on a client, your primary requirement is to shut up. You've now got your day in court. Yeah. This is what we need to gear everything to, is to win in that court case. And if they're willing to do that, we'll take them on. Case is the same thing. You know, there's an awful lot of media that happens around these cases, and our objective is to keep the media as low and ebb as possible. We don't want it influencing the courtroom. You don't want something being quoted by the lawyer or the client in the afternoon on the radio, and when the judge is going home and he walks back in the courtroom the next day and he's heard somebody say something negative about the case or him or something like that. So we avoid it. Evidence is huge. We get sent cases from lawyers across the country that have lost at the lower court, and they want us to appeal. And pretty much without exception, they're missing a huge amount of evidence that's required to actually win. Yes, it's not a criminal case, it's a charter case, but that means the evidence is that much more precious. So we do everything we can to get all of the evidence and even build the evidence if we get on the case early enough. Timing is critical. Is society ready for it? You know, I spoke with one law firm. They tried close to 200 COVID cases, and they lost them all, every one of them. And wow. It's simply because we're not seeing COVID, what we know of COVID, the truth about it, showing up in legacy media. CBC is not talking about it. You know, very few of them actually do. And until you get to the point where they're starting to look at it, and we all know when that's going to happen, right? When some of the expert witnesses, the scientific research starts to come to bear, we know then we can start winning in court. Next one.
Well, that's a problem we've seen throughout a lot of these, is judges are taking judicial notice of information from experts that isn't accurate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, totally. Yeah, and denying the ones that really are accurate. And yeah, it's for sure. Timing, as I mentioned with COVID, like we had the Ingram versus Alberta case, and it wasn't a charter win, but it was a win. Like there's a lot of fines that are being canceled because of it, and so that's a really good thing, right? But the challenge with that one too is that, you know, the judge in that case decided to actually make a comment about what the government had decided to do. Had it been just the Minister of Health or the health person, they could still have done those things, still taken our rights away.
Yeah.
Next one. Hear this a lot. Just fighting's enough. We just need to get out there and fight. And that might be true. Like when you think of slavery, gay rights, for example, they all lost until they won. And that was because the laws opposed them. Our challenge is the laws do not oppose us. We win 93% of the time. So taking a loss or risking a loss is just simply not good judgment. You're building a wall against us down the road. Next one. I hear this too. Judges and laws, they're all evil, right? And the challenge we've got is the judge basically has to make a decision on the submissions and the evidence that's provided to him. Yes, we have judges that, you know, on all sides of the spectrum. But you have to remember, pretty much every judge that I know of, they got into that and they decided to, accept becoming a judge because they really, really, really want to support the rule of law in our country. And like I said, we've had judges on cases that have, ideologically been on completely the opposite end of the spectrum. But when you presented the case and the law based on the law with the evidence, they decided for us. I've got a good example of a judge that I know who had to decide on a case. If the appellant lost, they were going to lose their kids. But the information that was provided, the direction from the lawyer, the evidence provided, he had no choice but to decide against them. It just broke his heart because otherwise it would be appealed and they'd lose at the higher court, which is even worse and could increase the penalty. So it really comes down to the lawyer that has to provide a compelling argument based on the law for their client. And if you don't do that well and you don't know how to do it, you're going to lose. Next slide. So here's the risk you run into. If somebody has their charter rights have been stepped on, they know a lawyer, they contact him. He really wants to help this guy out. It's kind of interesting to get into constitutional law, but he's been practicing criminal law or real estate law, those sorts of things, but he jumps in, gives it his best shot. The challenge is now he doesn't really know how to do it. The cases I get sent to me are maybe 60 to 150 pages long. Mm. Because submissions we make are 3,500 pages long, 4,500 pages long. There's an awful lot that has to be put into this. Client selection's at risk because they don't know what to look for. Is this somebody who you can really, you just want to raise money on, or do you want to win? Same thing with the case, and I've seen other groups do that. They could raise a lot of money on it, but they couldn't win. And I've talked to lawyers that have had that issue as well, where they were being forced to take the case on the client, knowing full well there's no way you could win, but you could raise money on it. Evidence, of course, is critical, and it has to be the right type of evidence. And they usually don't have somebody to strategize with. If it's somebody from Moosomin, Saskatchewan, who's gotten involved in this case, he doesn't know who to call, or she doesn't know who to call, or who they can speak with. Do you want a Wills and Estates lawyer, or you want a full-time constitutional lawyer? Well, obviously, you want the constitutional lawyer. Next one. So for us, it's giving lawyers an opportunity to just walk away from the billable hours scenario and focus exclusively on the law. By doing that, it allows us to deal with security issues. I actually live in the forest. We started getting threats whenever Carol would win a case, so people were threatening her life. We had worked for about 7 years, and the RCMP helped us hide our physical location. And then last in 21, somebody put the effort in to try and find us and then come to our house. So we purchased a place out in the country under a numbered company sort of thing. And so our lawyers, we want to be able to provide a level of security as well. And again, training. As I mentioned, our key lawyer right now is spending probably the next 2 months going through, 50 cases and thousands of pages. Client case and evidence, that's critical. And the lawyer has to be the one to pick it. They need to be able to manage it based on winning. Can we win with this client, with this case, with the information we've got? And of course, strategizing with the rest of the lawyers we know and the group down in the States, ADF. Next one. Okay, on the charity side. So our charity, next one, is subject to our law firm. By that, I mean, our charity cannot be saying things that the law firm will not agree with. So that means typically we're not in legacy media. We don't do, so you probably never heard of us. And it's because we simply don't do legacy media. Would it help us financially? Most definitely. When you think of the groups that are out there that are taking some of these high profile cases, they're making a lot of money off of them. We don't. Our goal is to win. And we're one of the only partner firms for Alliance Defending Freedom in Canada. And it's largely because of that. Our primary mandate is to win. The charity manages all of the marketing and the fundraising. It allows the law firm to focus on the client, case, and the evidence, and that's critical. It takes their mind away from all of those other issues. We also have national programs. It's a group of volunteers called The Watch, and I'm going to talk about that at the end. Next slide. I think this is where it's going to start to get a bit messy, Kerry. Not yet. I like this. Art of War. Tactics without strategy is annoyed before defeat. Essentially, just doing something without planning, with trusted advisors, ensures a loss. And I've seen this happen. There's about 400 freedoms groups across the country. And as I've talked to a lot of them and presented to a lot of them, they're sort of at that point. They've been doing a lot, but they really don't know where to go next and how to manage the next or what is the next. And so This is a key element for us as well. Next slide. Okay, so strategy groups. Sorry, this is going to be a bit messy. Kerry, if you click on that, yeah, and just lift it up. There. Okay, so
that works.
These strategy groups like parental rights, pro-lifers, medical, financial, political, personal data, all that, they help us to define or find cases and bring issues to the forefront. Most of the time in the legal world, you're waiting for a client to come to you, and then you build a case around that. For us, we want to get there early stage. If we can actually, before they actually do something that's going to get them in trouble, and we can be there, we can actually set up the case, set up the client, build the stream of evidence that we're going to need, and end up in the courtroom with it, and you can win them. So, this top box there says, these strategy partners assist us to connect with clients early stage. That's critical. One of the cases this morning, we thought we had early stage. Something's been happened. They've gotten a letter from the school board, the threatening letter, and we thought, great, this is perfect. We can wind this up a little bit and get it going in the right direction. But then we found out that they had done something else that was an awful lot more radical, and it pretty much ended their chances of winning. Next slide. This is a big question. Most people look at the legal side of it, well, we'll do everything that we can before we bring the lawyers in. Waiting could taint the evidence, right? It also removes our ability to get in there and set up the case. And so, we need to be able to build evidence trails, all those sorts of things. And if we could do that from the get-go, it makes a tremendous, difference in the outcomes. Next one. Here's a good example. I mentioned that we did some pro-life cases. There's only been about 19 pro-life cases across the country in the provinces. 7 of them are ours. We worked with some local groups in regions where we knew that they would get denied. All they wanted to do was put up ads, pretty simplistic ads. And so we worked with them. All 7 of the regions, as we worked through the process, deny. We ended up in court. We won 6 of them. The 7th one, the government tried to use it as a precedent in another hearing, and it was denied because it was so poorly written. And it was a very bad decision. The interesting thing about this, BC Civil Liberties is a decidedly pro-choice group. But I think on 2 of our cases here, they intervened on our side. And the reason they did that is they recognized that if the government changed, society changed, our loss could be used against them. And so they helped us on those cases and helped us win. Next slide. So these are the things that we're dealing with the partner groups that we're talking to. So on the financial security side, you've got central bank digital currency. If we're watching it a month ago, G20, all the countries decided they were going to get involved in that, and they've committed to it. Digital IDs as well. Of course, what it does is it provides control from the Bank of Canada. So the truckers rally, the government had to go to like RBC and have them shut down those accounts. And they did for the most part. There was only one bank that didn't. And that's here in Alberta, I think Bow Valley Credit Union. And, for us on this one, what we're wanting to do, so we're actually having a lot of strategy meetings around this right now, is how do we challenge this at the legislation level, not once it's out and it's actually done harm. Yeah. So our goal is to try and deal with it before it gets out the door on that. Digital IDs, if you could see, click on that federal government 2015 to 23 and just drag it up, Kerry. Yeah, just the whole block, drag it up. Yeah. So during the pandemic, you can see that skeleton there with a little chip in the midst of it. Well, that's what the government was actually looking at mandating here in Alberta. I mentioned those 3,500 doctors we worked with, doctors, nurses, and professionals. And this was going to be mandated, that we would actually have it, and it would notify them when you would have your next booster. Never made it out the door. The premier ended up getting toasted. And so that's stopped. Then, of course, you got the World Economic Forum, World Agile Nations Agreement. Of course, that basically, if you can see behind that, it moved the legislative branch from, just click on the skeleton and drag him up out of the way.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So
basically, the executive branch is now operating completely independent of the legislative branch. And that's a scary thing. And on the right are all the areas of the charter that are being breached by all of these. Next slide. That's going to be messy.
That's all right.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
Are you saying that implantable microchips were on the table during the pandemic?
Hold on till the next slide.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. So this is the one we represented those 3,500 doctors, nurses, and so on. If you've got a friend that's got diabetes, you can get a body implant like that. They actually put it under the layer of skin. You can preload it with, I think, 3 or 4 injections so that you're injected at the right time throughout the course of the year. That was actually on the table as well. They were talking about these being mandated. And so that's what was getting these doctors and nurses so upset. Okay. There's also within the medical side on the there's a move right now to create a Hippocratic Oath medical system. So I had always thought that doctors, all of them had to declare the Hippocratic Oath or commitment to it. That stopped years ago in Canada.
Yes, it did.
It's no longer a requirement, right? So to support life. So there's a group of doctors in Alberta right now trying to get a dual medical system, still operating under the provincial government, but not independent. But that will work exclusively on the Hippocratic Oath side of things. So never doing abortions or MAID or anything like that. Then you've got WHO, the Global Pandemic Treaty again, and it's bypassing the legislative branch. MAID, I think if you were watching, they were going to be introducing or increasing the bill to include mental illness. Yes. And that just got voted down. Thank goodness. Okay. And of course, the charter breaches on the right. Next slide. There we go. I'm just going to read this first, okay? So there were 290 bank accounts frozen, and David Lametti, Justice Minister, he said, if you're a member of the pro-life movement and basically a political party you don't like, or activities you don't like, or speaking against the Liberal Party, who is donating hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars to this kind of thing, right? Another political party, then you ought to be worried. To make a statement like that, it's just phenomenal. You want to grab that box, Kerry, and just pull it up out of the way? So on the digital ID front, essentially they're talking about a social credit system, and that's what that could be used for. Well, we already have a credit system, right? Whenever you buy a house, they go in and take a look at your credit rating and so on. So that exists already. What they're planning on this, from what we're understanding with the political people we know, is to expand that. So it brings all of your data together. Health, personal banking, all that stuff comes into one place. One of our donors is a man from China, and him and I have talked this through quite a bit. Like the whole 15-minute city gets attached to this. And in China, basically, if you do or say something that the government doesn't like, and of course everybody's listening, your neighbors included, your phone will glow red. And that means you can't buy a bus ticket, an airplane ticket. You can't get a taxi ride anywhere. You're basically walking, and until you get straightened out, right? The Emergencies Act, again, all the debanking that went on around that, and that's another thing that has to find its day in court. Once this, the National Citizens Inquiry is done, then that's going to open the door for some more court challenges too. There's a lot of disregard for the charter right now, decisions being out there, and it's really all come about because of the pandemic and the government getting sort of, ultimate freedoms to do and make mistakes. And of course, they've done a lot. And of course, right now, the deterioration of rights to protest. So in Calgary, there's bylaws now that basically they have to agree with what you're saying. And, that's got to find its day in court as well. And then all the charter breaches on the right. Next slide.
Oops.
On the religious freedom side, of course, through the pandemic, churches were being seized. Pastors arrested. We represented Pastor Lynn in Ontario, and he was just basically a pastor in the downtown core. He was preaching on the street on a weekend and got arrested by one of the trans police officers there. And it was an interesting thing. I learned a lot because they had about 200 pastors show up at the hearing, the initial hearing for Pastor Lynn. All of them, without exception, were new immigrants to Canada. They left their home country to come to Canada. And what they were so upset about was this is exactly what they were fleeing in their home country, and it was happening here. They were in shock. Some of these people were in tears. They couldn't believe it was happening. And I tend to speak in churches as well. And if you flip to the next slide, this is a section that that we have a real lot of problems with in the current. Okay, first, if you click on where it says 3, and just there's going to be a small text block there. Yeah, grab that and pull it. Just move it out of the way. Okay. So it says, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against God, and what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right. That word "not," underneath it is "but for those who do wrong." So what happens though when it says, "For rulers hold terror for those who do right, not for those who do wrong"? And that's exactly what's happening. And so from a legal perspective, all bets are out. The contract's null and void. This no longer applies. It's time to stand up and fight. And it's a real challenge right now to get churches in that mode. And it's really heartwarming for me. One of the ones I spoke to in New Brunswick a few months back, they were climbing the rafters. They're so hepped up about what's happening and how it's opposing everything that's going on from their perspective. And I thought that was great. Next slide. This is a big one. I think all of us have been sitting here watching what's not being said, right? And that's what's at issue here. Right now, the government has an authorization way, or a way of authorizing media outlets and funding them through CRA. And if you go to their site, you can actually see it. It's at the Canada.gc site, and it's a list. You can actually find a list of qualifying digital news subscribers. And so there's 179 media outlets that are receiving funding from our federal government. And essentially, it's you get the money if you say or don't say what we want you to say or not say, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And so that just flies in the face of everything from a freedoms perspective. So the issue is it's not what we're not seeing in the legacy media. That's the issue, right? And of course, the non-qualified media outlets are being classified as, misinformers. Next slide. On the political side, all of these supranational agreements like the WHO, World Economic Forum, they're all in place. I love this. This is a Wall Street Journal that said this. We're losing our soul, our sense of purpose as a society, our identity as a civilization. We in the West are in the grip of an ideology that disowns our genius, denounces our success, disdains merit, elevates victimhood, embraces societal self-loathing, and enforces it all in a web of exclusionary and authoritarian rules, large and small. Ain't that the truth? That's exactly what we're seeing. And Wall Street Journal, that was amazing. Next slide. But we can win. Even with all this that's out there, we can win. Our laws still support us. We have to go at this in a very intelligent way and strategize with those groups that we can work with and make a difference. Next slide. Okay. Just click on what we've been doing and push it out of the way. So the question is, do we need to use violence? And a lot of the people I talk to right now, there's a lot of them that would be in that mode. And of course, you can't do that. Do we need to submit? No, we can't do that either. We're responsible, right? We elect these people. But if that's all we do, if we just walk in there and make our little tick and then walk away, which is sort of the standard practice for most Canadians, then what Plato says is exactly what's going to happen. The price good men pay for apathy in public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And it's because that's what we're
trying to change.
Exactly. And, that's the cool thing about 400 groups like this around the country. And they're all striving to do something along these lines. When you think about it, from an employer perspective, you hired or elected them. Do you just leave it at that? Well, no, you check them out. You hold them accountable. Yeah. I remember my mom and dad were very politically active when I was a kid. When they got somebody in, as soon as something looked a little odd, they'd phone him. Or they'd go into his office. They did not let him back down.
Yeah.
And that's the piece that we're missing right now. Next slide. Okay, so click on the bigger letters there and just drag them to the side. So it basically says we don't need to be extreme, we don't need to give up, but we need to come at this in a broad way. So from us, our perspective is on the personal side. talking to friends, family, your church people, places of work. Keep talking about it. Everybody that I talk to brings this up. They don't know how to do it. They're really just concerned. And my typical thing is just keep trying. You'll find the hole. Because this is a point right now where they just don't want to hear it. You just have to be consistent. Our donors. So the donors that we have they're people with understanding. They understand they're not going to be able to say, oh, gee, yeah, they just won this court case. I donate to them, because we're not going to show up in the media. And I can tell you 100%, when we win a case that opposes what's going on in society right now, they don't report on it. It never makes the media. Volunteers.
So that's the answer to the question I have, which is, how have I not met you yet?
Yeah, really.
Because we avoid it. We avoid legacy media. So you haven't heard of it. And up until now, we were, it was working fine. We were, doing our $600,000-$700,000 a year, winning cases, setting precedents, and that's been great. But Carol and I last realized we need to expand this. There's so many other things. So everything that I'm doing right now is exactly what we planned. And so the volunteer piece, providing accountability, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit here. Protesters and activists. So one of the groups that I'm working with is a very large activist group. They're right across the country. I think she's got 120 little groups across the country. They can do and say things that I can't do and say. So if we strategize with them, pull in a client perhaps through their contacts, get a case mounted, they can be speaking in the same region that we're hosting that case or in the courts on, and saying things out in the public that we can't.
That's right.
And they love it. Like the lady that manages this, she said, I've been wishing somebody would do this for a decade. She's been out there for 10 years. And she's taken a lot of personal beatings, from the media and everybody else for her standing up. But we need to be able to bring the legal side of this to bear. So for us, it's lawyers being, creating positive precedents, politicians that are willing to propose and enact laws, clients are willing to face the personal turmoil. And this is tremendously difficult. I don't even know if I can express to you the challenge that this is for individuals to be involved in one of these cases. Next slide. So now strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. In other words, don't just talk about it, go and do something, right? So there's that two-sidedness to it. We have to be strategizing, but then you have to do something. You can't just sit back. Next slide. So from our side, that's what it's a group we're calling the Watch. And it's basically a group of volunteers that's supported by a constitutional law firm. So we'll provide all the training and educational opportunity. We'll develop and support that will be developed by the lawyers in the law firm. We'll help them to understand the charter, the precedents. It's interesting. I go out to these freedoms groups, and I've probably spoken to about 25 or 30 of them now. And I asked everyone, how many have read the charter? There's only 34 points, and it's not that long.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was one a couple weeks ago, 120 people out, and maybe 10 of them put their hands up.
Yeah.
And these are people that are active. They're out there. They're standing up for all the right stuff. But they haven't read the charter yet. So, there's a big piece there. And basically, we need to train them on how to hold government accountable, what works. And people like talking about this. So we'll train them on how to do that, how to educate others and bring them along. And of course, we want to hit every community in the country. Next slide. Now, that's a lot of people, every community in the country. So my previous job, I was with a very large chain. We had the group that I managed about 30,000 volunteers annually. Some of those volunteers worked 4 hours a week for us, some 4 hours a year, but a lot of diversity within the group. And so basically training them on how to, on a weekly basis, find out what's going on in the town hall, the local Department of Health, whatever piece they're looking at, and keep us updated. If there's a breach, let us know. We might be able to connect with that person right off the bat. If we can get in there and secure a client case and evidence before anything else happens, that allows us to take it right down the right path, build the evidence stream that we need, and be successful in court. Next slide. So doing this, essentially these volunteers, we're going to vet them. People that are, more of an activist, it's not going to fit. We're looking for firm, reasonable people who can handle being bored. Watching the legislature or the House on TV is a really boring thing. And it is the same when it's a local city hall meeting and those sorts of things. But we need people that are willing to just diligently watch and keep us informed. Our growth, of course, we want to stage it. We probably got about 100 people right now that want to take part. We haven't started building the content yet. That's the first part of next year. So we're moving down this path. And of course, it'll be set up in a team structure. So a local volunteer leader will lead a team. Somebody will be focused on city hall, municipality, public affairs, school boards. And as they're keeping track of them, we'll be keeping track of them, right? And keeping watch on them. Next slide. Annual meetings and conferences. This is sort of a two-sided thing. We're starting to look at putting, and we're going to host our first one in February this coming year. It's going to be called a Freedom Forum. So we're going to be giving people an opportunity to speak that are not being allowed to speak. Some of them are fairly well-known people. The one that we're going to be doing in February is a lady that's from the States. She's probably got several million followers, but she can't get a place to speak in Canada, or at least in Vancouver. So we're going to be working with her to bring her to Alberta. And so at these conferences, there'll be that aspect, the Freedom Forum, to be followed by the Watch Conference. And they'll be giving status reports, hear and be heard, training. Because it's the charter, things are constantly shifting and changing. So they need to be updated on what's going on, what these decisions mean, how it affects us, and just encouragement. It's a place to celebrate wins and learn from your losses. As I mentioned, I was at a conference in the States, 800 lawyers. The opening speaker was Ron DeSantis. And, these are a group of lawyers that are facing darkness all the time, the evil that's going on in our country. And, for myself, same thing, Carol and I, you're just dealing with this negative stuff all the time. And we came away from that conference just charged. You feel like, okay, everybody recognizes what we're doing. We've got cohorts. We're on a team. And it's also a tremendous fundraising channel. And of course, this is not cheap work. So we're trying to, raise as much money as we can to be as effective as we can. Next slide. This is interesting. I mentioned that we sit down with our clients and help them decide whether or not they're going to get involved. And we read them the riot act. This is what's going to happen. You're going to lose family members. Your friends are going to disown you. Everybody's going to come out against you. And that's what they say. If not me, then who?
Yeah.
Right. We have a tendency, we just think that things are going to get better. So we don't have to worry about it. But they're not. They tend to degrade. The thing is, if you stand, it strengthens you and you feel secure. Even if you're the only one standing, you personally feel secure. If you don't, if you submit, it creates fear in your life and it's insecurity. Even if think about it. All these people that have submitted to all of the vaccine mandates, there's a level of insecurity out there for them. And I like what Bort Peterson says. If we stand and face it, we take part in the adventure of our life. Well, about a decade ago, Carol found this quote, and it's sort of been my daughter's just had it engraved in a big chunk of wood in my house here. Flip the slide. This is what the adventure looks like. That is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotion, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Mm-hmm. Well, guys, that's you guys, right? You're in there, with your face.
Everybody watching as well, and because especially after this ambassadors tour that we're doing, we're trying to get people involved, and like that's a great quote. I'm definitely gonna post that because we tell everybody, don't just sit back idly. You got to get involved, because otherwise we're going to be doing exactly the same thing indefinitely.
Yep.
Whose quote is that?
Sorry?
Whose quote is that?
That's Teddy Roosevelt.
Okay.
Good old Teddy. Next slide. So this is the last slide. Basically, what we need is funding. Huge. That's an enormous piece for us, bringing enough funds together to make this effective. We worked very well over the past decade, doing a few cases at a time, getting up to close to 50. But it takes a tremendous amount of money to win these cases. Mm-hmm. Volunteers, and for anybody that's thinking about that and would like to do it, just go on our website, the Freedom's Advocate site, and go to the page that says, Can you flip the slide and then go back?
Yep. Go back.
There's a page on the web. No, the other, go the other way. There, to the Make a Difference tab.
Okay.
You go there and just register, like, subscribe with us, and you'll start to get information from us on an ongoing basis. You'll find out when the watch is going to be formed, all those things. And if you want to volunteer, then you'll find out there. You'll get our newsletter every week. That's or every month. Go back again, Kerry. Then on the strategy group piece, and making it connect with Kerry and Chris here. This is this is the kind of thing I need. Is folks that we can lean into. They have a much broader understanding of what the key issues are, potential cases around the country. They can help us with client selection, case selection, promotional assistance. We avoid legacy media.
Yeah.
Right. So if we can be out there with them, it helps us. Messaging, right? Saying what we can't say and doing what we can't do. So basically getting the message out there effectively from multiple sources.
Yeah.
And that's us.
That's awesome.
Sorry, I talked about that.
There's obviously so much to talk about in that presentation. I'm going to work backwards.
That was not what I expected either.
No. I'm going to work backwards just a little bit because it's obviously fresh in our mind. So you have not had any legacy media, or have you done anything with any, I'll call it independent media? Have you done anything with Western North?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we had one reporter at Western Standard that we've done some things with.
Okay.
We get chased by, like, we're involved in the parental rights case in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
So to our pride versus the provincial government. So we're intervening on that case.
Yeah.
So we've had CBC, CTV, Global, all of them coming at us to do interviews. The problem we've seen is that when the worst one was always CBC. We would do an interview, they would completely take apart what we said.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
yes.
they make us look like bad guys. And so, the problem with that is the interview's happening when the case is in court. So the judge drives home and he hears what you're being misquoted at saying. Right? And so that plays into, the judge is a human being just like everybody else. And if you offend them or say something that's not true and they're looking at you the next day in the courtroom, it doesn't play very well. So for us, we realized we can't be in the media. If we're going to win these cases, we need to be able to get that judge an opportunity, give him an opportunity to look at this just purely from a legal perspective. What is the law? What are the options for decisions? What are the evidence? And present it in such a way that he can get on your side and, give us the decisions. Now, we haven't won all of our decisions at the lower courts. We've had to go to appeal courts as well. But an appeal court decision is actually better, right? It's stronger. So, but we still won 93% of them. And our goal is to keep winning them.
Now, obviously, we're kind of really in on a lot of cases, right? We talk about the Peckford and Bernier case. We talked about Sheila Nett Lewis. We've talked about the pastors. We've talked about Coots. We've talked about the Ingram case. Is there anything that you have done that has that notoriety? Because what I'm thinking is that, like, there's got to be precedents that you guys have done that could help any of these other cases.
See, lawyers find those. Like, there's all the places, there's, canon law, there's places to find those precedents all over the place. So lawyers can find them. They're there.
Okay.
For us, the University of Manitoba case, it was a Coptic Christian Egyptian, right? They moved here to escape the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt.
Yeah.
And they're Coptic Christians. They moved here. Their son was teaching Sunday school. And in the Sunday school class, he was teaching about pro-life, right? That he opposed abortion. And he's in med school. The university found out about it and they kicked him out of school. We picked him up, started working with him, cost $155,000, and we won. But we avoided the media. It never made it to the media. Right? And it's a win. It was a tremendous win. Yeah. And we've got tons of cases like that. But we don't really want a judge to be able to look at us and disqualify us because of something that's been misquoted in the media.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I've got a question that kind of goes along with that. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that what you do requires a strong faith in the judicial system and its ability to be used to protect us, if done right and used correctly. Would that be fairly accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. So we get a lot of questions all the time about instances where the judiciary seems to be failing people. For instance, the men that are in jail in Coots right now. What do you say to people like that as they watch these things occur? They watch these harms occurring around us with resolution, like it's seemingly so far off, and yet people are suffering. How would you encourage them to keep the faith while those things are happening around us?
Well, Chris, that's part of the reason we're sort of stepping past our normal mode of operating, because we know we've got to be out there more. We need lawyers that are focused on this exclusively. The lawyers that sort of get into these cases, and some of them do really well. Jeff Roth they won that case. It wasn't charter, but they mentioned the charter in it.
Yeah.
And that's a tremendous. Look what happened. Tremendous win.
Yeah.
But the mass majority of lawyers out there get involved in these cases and they fail. It's just because it's the foundational law of the country, right? And it takes an awful lot to win one of these cases. And so we've got to get out there more. That's one side of it.
Why is it so hard for us to stand on the charter that's supposed to protect us? What is the deal there?
Well, compare us with the states. Constitutional challenges down there happen every Wednesday. It's a nonstop. They're very into going to court there. We're not.
Yeah.
Like when you think about the pro-life groups, and the pro-choice groups, they've had huge amount of battles publicly, but there's only been 19 cases in Canada. Like that's tremendously low.
That is
so
true.
A lot of what's happening here is people are just not used to it. They're not aware of how to fight them in court, how to take the judge that's sitting before you who's never sat on a charter case before. The charter for most Canadians for the 20 years ago was just the charter. It existed. It was a nice piece of paper. That was it. It never really showed up in a courtroom anywhere until recently. And so we're sort of at that foundational level. And it really behooves us to spend an awful lot of effort on learning, understanding, being educated on how to do this. Krista, our lead counsel here, she's a 30-year lawyer. She spent 20 years on Bay Street in Toronto. Like this person's done an awful lot of heavy-duty lifting in the courtroom, and she's really tasked to get this, to understand the approach, how to deal with it, what's required, those sorts of things. But if you do it well, you can win. But it's going to take some work.
We certainly,
we can't expect it to be easy. Yeah, we need to win, but we can't expect it to be easy. We are dealing with the foundational law of our country. And I think what's happening, what I've seen over the past few months as I've traveled around is just a lot of frustration, anger, and justly so. But the awareness of what is really happening behind the scenes is not there, right? They don't really grasp what politically is happening and how it can be used against us, what's already happened. Like, if you're putting all of your hopes in a political strike, you're in trouble, because even the Conservatives have passed a lot of legislation that could really be used against us here, unknowingly perhaps. I had a conversation. I have had several conversations with Leslie Lewis, and she's, what she's seeing every day is just shocking. So we need to encourage people like that are in the midst of it. And so, there's not a lot of people that are, ideologically, I guess, on our side. But the ones that are, we need to encourage as much as we can.
And if we don't do something, who will?
Yeah, the opposite. Yeah, the opposing side will. Yeah. Right? They're not laying back and taking things lightly. Right. So for example, parental rights in Saskatchewan right now, the group To Our Pride is being sponsored by a foundation out of Montreal that has a lot of money. And so they're kind of driving this with a group out of the University of Regina that's really small and have never been involved in anything like this before. And suddenly they're the baseball bat that's being used to try and corral the government. Yeah. So for us, it's really weird for us to actually be in court supporting the government. How weird is that? But, we need to, when they do the right things.
Yeah.
that is one of the things that I found is the biggest obstacle to standing under the charter or on the supreme law of the country is the cost, right? My simple matter with my restaurant, and I shouldn't say simple, it wasn't all that simple. For me, it's pretty black and white, cut and dry. But anyway, the cost was staggering. Like, for me to fight the government and say, no, what you did to me was not lawful. There's no way that I could do it on my own. It took thousands of people coming together and crowdfunding to do it. And I'm not the only one. There's tons of them out there.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that the question I have is, because that's so expensive, it's not a question as so much as a statement. Because that's so expensive and there's no way to fight it on our own as individuals, I think what you guys are doing and others similar to you is so important, because it allows people to help others so that they might not have to go through the same things. Yeah. And you guys are a registered charity, so I'm assuming you issue tax receipts.
Yeah.
Right. And that's yeah. I think there's going to be we're going to have to do a whole nother follow-up to this, because like I said before, I was not expecting this.
Yeah.
I was thinking like, this is going to be some law, we won these court things like this. But what you've said tonight, had we heard this maybe 2 or 3 years ago, things might be a little bit different right now. And I want people to understand that there is a difference between lawyers just doing their job, just like the police were doing their job when they came to arrest me, and lawyers that are specifically fighting for constitutional rights or charter rights. That's a big difference. And I've been persecuted for standing up for my charter rights and fighting in court because of the precedent that you mentioned that could be set contrary to our rights and freedoms, right? So, yeah, I don't know if that statement came out how I wanted to. I've got so many questions, and my mind's kind of a jumble of information right now.
I mean, what you said is exactly right. But, I think what we're seeing across our country is an awful lot of really ardent people wanting to do something effective. The freedoms groups that I've connected with, they're all sort of at a tipping point. They've had a lot of support through COVID, and they've wanted, everybody was really upset. Now it's sort of waned a bit, so they're losing people. One group had 1,500 people in it at one point. Now they can't get 40 people together, and they haven't made the transition to what's really going on, what's behind the scenes, what drove government to do what they did, because they knew they had the ability to do it, and they could get away with it because of all that had been gone on in legislation and bills that have been passed in the past. And so it's we're at a point right now where we really need to be intentional and strategic about what we're doing and working together. Groups like ours, we can be that much more effective if we've got groups around us supporting us, from the client, the case, the evidence, helping to build those things, speaking out where we can't speak. That kind of a concerted effort, I think, is going to really make a big difference as well. The battles we've got coming down the road are enormous. This digital currency thing, it's not something they'd like to do. There are plans to do it. There's now a bill in the States, a legislator down there proposed to stop it, to make it illegal to create a digital currency. And, we don't have those kind of legislators here right now. So we're going to have to rely somehow. One of the people that we talk with is a fairly high up political strategist. And so had a coffee last week, and some of the steps we could take at the House of Commons and those sorts of places within committees, they're available to us. We just need to figure out how to do it and how to do it effectively. And is it us that should do it, or is it somebody else? So it's working through some of those details and putting a plan together, and something that's going to, span 4 or 5 years perhaps. But all of the ducks need to be lined up so we can knock them down at the right time.
Yeah. You were talking primarily we need funding in order to do this, because the government can basically print as much money as they want. And Easton, I'm actually going to put a couple of comments up here and questions, because we're now in an hour and 10 minutes, and normally we have already gone into this. So Easton absolutely says, for example, Without Papers finally had all their charges from the city of Calgary dropped, and that was today. But in the process, they crushed the owner's business. We finally won the battle, but lost the war. This is the tactic of governments on all levels, forced them to go to court, then crush them because the government has unlimited taxpayer funds to throw at the problem. And basically he says exactly the same thing, that court challenges are useless when the government has unlimited tax funds to fight against you.
Kerry, the number of times my wife was standing in court alone.
Yeah.
And there's 4 government lawyers or 5 government lawyers standing opposite it, you know?
Oh, that's
It's
wild.
just
Yeah.
shocking, you know, hundreds
Well,
of thousands. And of course, then you get charged costs if you lose,
yeah.
right?
And Chris has had so initially he just had AHS and the RCMP, but the next group after you were fighting it again, you know, last year, you had what, 6 different government groups?
Oh, there was the Attorney General's office, RCMP representation. There was a couple other interveners that I don't remember, but there was just a sea of black suits on the prosecution side. It was somewhat intimidating.
Yeah.
Somewhat.
Well, you know, Chris, we're intimidated. You go into court these days, and you know the judge is against you, or at least ideologically. It's a kind of a shocking thing.
And
they do stack the cards against you.
Is that normal that the judges kind of look at you and say, no, you know what, I'm probably going to rule in favor of the government?
We've actually had a judge say that.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, well, you know, one of the lawyers that we've worked with over the years is a really senior lawyer in Calgary, and he's been involved in, you know, discussions around the charter, not so much actual cases, but really respected when it came to charter law.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a co-counsel on 2 of Carol's cases. And she was telling him some of the antics that were happening in the courtroom with some of these judges, and he didn't believe her. And then he went into the first one with her, and he was shocked. He said, I've never, in all my years, and he's in his 60s, seen a judge respond or act that way in a courtroom. And it's the topic, it's the ideological stuff that's going on societally. All of it's pushing people, you know, to the extreme.
Yeah.
But you know, our goal is we need to ratchet it back, present in a firm, reasonable way, and be seen that way in the courtroom.
Yeah.
And that helps the judge to ratchet back as well, and just look at it from a purely legal perspective as much as possible. And so for us, our submissions have to do that as effectively as our speaking in the room does.
I had a judge in his summary of my conviction for contempt of court.
I'll hide that for a second.
Interject evidence into it that neither party had mentioned. Even AHS's lawyers were kind of looking like, what the heck is we talking about here? He said things like, due to the irreparable, immeasurable harm that I had done the people of Alberta. And that was not anything ever brought up. Like, and it was a completely ideologically delivered summary of his findings, and both sides, even AHS's lawyers, couldn't believe it. So I'm well aware of that. But that brings up another question. How do we deal with those types of things? And I call it activist judges or judicial activism.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part is, how do we deal with the pesky Section 1 argument?
Yeah, 433.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I think what we've done, because we've not had it used against us in the decision. Well, we had a loss in the federal court, but that they didn't use that. They just decided against us. I think it really does come back to being reasonable in the courtroom. You know, presenting your case in a way that's going to be heard or they're willing to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And that really means you have to know your stuff. If you're standing in front of a judge and you're just spitballing it because it's the first case you've done, the likelihood of that getting used is pretty great. They don't want to waste the time. But, you know, it was interesting. Carol was in a Toronto courtroom, and the opposing counsel was a really well-respected lawyer in Toronto, highly respected. And he stood up in his opening comments and said, Your Honor, this Ms. Crosson here, this is all she does. She does this right across the country, you know, day in and out. This is all she does. And he was trying to say it in a real derogatory way. But, you know, Carol called me after and she said, you know, you know, where negative press is actually good. You know, he was basically saying she knows more than me. Right. And we have to be seen that way. We have to be seen as credible.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, for us, I know a lot of activists, but I'm never going to be on their website. They won't be on ours.
Yeah.
We will never appear. I'm not going to go to their events. We don't attend pro-life rallies. We don't go. We have to be not only objective on our side, but we have to be seen as objective.
Mm-hmm.
We're here representing the charter and, you know, trying to bring good, solid precedents forward.
Well, it'd certainly be interesting to to talk to you about individual cases and find out where, what you think of them, and if you would have any strategy going forward with what you know. And of course, that's a lot of things, is that we think we know certain things, but like, here's a good example is with the Coots 4. We have a publication ban against anything going out in the media. So there's only so much that we can even talk about. And even if we were to go into the courtroom, we can't talk about that after. So the only way you could do it would be talk amongst yourselves, right? You just can't broadcast this.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm in the same boat. I get asked about other law firms and cases and stuff, and I really can't comment. I mean, within the legal world, there's, a level of professionalism that doesn't allow for that. Right. So, I really can't comment on somebody else's case. I can sit back there with everybody else and chew my fingernails just like the rest of us. But yeah.
So there's a comment in there saying that I admitted the court system is corrupt. That's not completely accurate. What I've admitted is that the court system is run by human beings, and human beings are not perfect. We're all subject to our own individual biases, and that's what we have to deal with. So what Randy is saying is that the way we counter that is we be reasonable and we do a good job in there, so that even activist judges can overcome their own biases, because they've been presented the evidence in such a way that lets them do that. So I'm not saying it's corrupt, and I'm not saying there's no corruption. I'm just saying that wasn't the purpose of my statement.
Exactly. That's exactly it. I think the thing that I've noticed ever since Carol got into law, and we've gotten to know an awful lot of lawyers, a lot of judges, and it's pretty much without exception. Of course, there's a few in there that are airheads, just like everybody. There are some, but for the most part, the rule of law is very important to these people, especially judges. They see it as the cornerstone to our society. If the rule of law fails, then our country can fail, and it's true. Like, there is a huge amount of truth to that. And so these people have gotten involved in this passion for their life, and they want it to be honored, respected, and operate and function properly.
Was there other questions up there, Kerry?
There's actually quite a few. I mean, even one from, of course, everybody knows or should know, Dr. Dennis Modry. How does APP keep track of what Freedom's Advocate is doing so that we can help? So just go to the website. What should we do?
Subscribe. Yeah, just go on the website, subscribe. If you have $1 million, donate. Actually, if you can donate $10 a month, do it. Right, every little bit helps, and just go there, donate, or get involved. So that'll allow you to subscribe to our newsletter.
Click the donate button.
Yeah, I want to see what the link is, because Michelle posted the link. Okay, Chris, so that was the right link.
Chris usually says, then Kerry, put your credit card information in.
Yeah, we'll just try it, see, make sure it's working.
Yeah, so you can, under the campaign piece, it allows you to designate if you want to, or just leave it open for whoever.
Yeah.
But we now have we've launched our web Facebook site, or Twitter account, or our X account. Good. So those are both on live, and so we're starting to reach out to more people.
Okay. Well, that's excellent.
Yeah, this is odd for us too, guys. So it's this is the first time we've done it this way. Yeah. So it's become quite a balancing act, trying to figure out what I can and can't say, those sorts of things. Yeah. And I don't want to offend people. That's the other side of it, right? So, yeah. This is over the next year, I'm going to get better at it, but yeah.
It's a steep learning curve, eh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tremendously.
Now that you have the social media stuff, you're going to have to hire another full-time staff
person just to look after that. I know even APP, we run into that. We actually have a group of volunteers now, social media, Facebook, website, events. You need that. Well, specifically for what we're doing, but I can definitely see charity. You need a whole group of people just specific to that. Never mind the actual law side.
Yeah, we've got 4 staff right now, that some are contract, part-time too. Yeah. We need one more to start working on the watch, building the content. I already know who the person is that I'd like to bring into that role, and then just start walking it out across the country. One of the things that I've seen, and I do know, is it doesn't take a lot of people to make a big difference. And we'll grow just like everybody else has. And you just keep putting one foot in front of the other one.
Chris, do you want to?
I almost asked what part of the country you're in, then I remembered you live in the forest.
You guys are in Calgary, right?
The boreal forest, which is really big, so there's no pinpointing at all.
Yeah, I just got a black bear and a grizzly bear that's roaming through here right now. So,
oh wow!
I'm hoping they've gone to sleep.
I guess it would be about that time.
The reason I asked where you're going to be at, or where you're at, is because tomorrow, Kerry and I are going to be.
Oh yes,
there.
Yeah, that's another one of those things that I can't go to.
Mm-hmm.
Because it also takes it somebody showing, Mr. Crosson here was in at this thing, so obviously, he's one of those activists.
Yeah.
So although we support them tremendously, it's a challenge for us to go. We have to be seen as objective and
that's
somewhat
true.
separate.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, I commend you for that, because there's a lot of stuff going on that's pretty interesting to go to.
It is amazing, yeah. I just watched the one from Jordan Peterson and the group that he's ARC, I think it's called. That's an interesting one too.
Yes, the ARC, where he was in the UK. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wendy says freedom advocates or freedom's advocate will grow now that you've been on this show.
Thank you. I very much appreciate it. Yeah, and quite honestly,
I hope so for sure.
Yeah. No, if there's people that would like to hear more in other groups, smaller groups, major donors, people like that, let them know. Okay. I'm getting awfully used to asking for money.
Well, it has to be done, because you're not asking for money from the people that you're trying to help, right? So people have to rally around and do it together. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Chris, did you want to wrap this up into something that in the APP package that we usually try and do? Because obviously, we went into this, we were overstepped by the charter, which is the federal document. And it gave the federal government certain rights, which is, the right not to travel. Perfect example for the Brian Peckford case, which was obviously trampled, right? Because the ruling that my understanding is, that happened in the past. So, that's in the past. We don't have to worry about it now.
I'm going to use that in traffic court next time I get a speeding ticket.
That's right. Which is absolute garbage. But if we were our own sovereign nation, or we were asked, had more rights in terms of Canada, would we be able to have done a lot better through the pandemic, through a lot of these issues where people lost their businesses, people lost their lives. Right.
Yeah, sure. I can wrap that up. And Randy, feel free to jump in anytime. So I get this question a lot. How would an independent or sovereign Alberta benefit us and change things that have happened over the last 4 years? And my answer comes with a caution as well. And that is, it doesn't matter whether Alberta is its own independent nation or we're within Confederation or whatever. If people fail to do the duty, our civic duty, and be engaged and keep watch on politics and what's going on, we will slide into tyranny. That's the way it works. That's the way it's been across the entirety of history. We get comfortable. We stop paying attention. The lunatics take over the asylum, and then we're left to pick up the pieces. In this case, an independent Alberta would have a voice and the ability to change things, to make law to our benefit. Right now, our voice within Confederation, within Parliament, isn't loud enough to change anything. As a matter of fact, British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, we could all say the same thing, and Eastern and Central Canada would chart our course forward for us, because that's the way it is. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't keep going. We shouldn't keep fighting and chipping away and trying to make a difference. But if the cost of not doing anything is sliding into that tyranny where our rights and freedoms can be removed on a prime minister's whim, we must prepare and do something else. We must be ready to chart our own course forward in a manner that our voices are heard. That's the only way democracy can work, and that's the only way we prevent the things that we said not to do. like become violent or go outside of the law. We want to do things lawfully. And that means we may have to take the reins, and we do it. So that's how this law portion ties in. And I'm sorry it's not a silver bullet, because becoming an independent nation wouldn't mean that all these problems are fixed. All it would mean is that you have an opportunity to have your voice heard. And if we do our civic duty, we have the opportunity to remain free well into the future and be a beacon of hope to everybody else too. So there is that. Yeah. So yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, that's well said. And again, it's just get involved. I mean, it's such a simple statement to say, just get involved, whether it's your local communities, get involved in municipal, provincial, even federal, CA, constituency association, anything that you can. It's something that I hate to compare us to the United States, but in the United States, almost everybody down there belongs to some sort of political party. They're involved in their community, et cetera, et cetera. Canadians are kind of apathetic that way. We're just not that. And maybe it's just because there's never really been a need to, because, hey, look, we got a Charter of Rights that says this is this, and I can go about doing my own stuff. And of course, now we know that is not the way it's been working.
We're very young. We're inexperienced. We haven't had to stand up and fight for the rights and freedoms that we have. They were acknowledged by our government. Yeah. We thought that was all fine and dandy. Yeah. And unlike the United States, and certainly unlike Europe, we have never faced tyranny in this country until now. But at least we have a template because we watched other countries do it.
Yeah, that's very true. Excellent. Well, with that, I'm gonna say thank you again, Randy, for coming on. You're muted. I don't know if you know that, just in case. But again, thank you so much for coming on and letting us know about Freedom's Advocate. And we will definitely have another conversation, definitely in the future, to see where you are at, what cases you're working on, and obviously what APP can do to help you out as well too. So, thank you. And so. I'm going to hide you, and I think Chris and I are going to talk for another 5 or 10 minutes. You're more than welcome to stay on in the background and listen to what we have to say. But again, thank you very much, Randy, for everything that you and
yes, thank you, Randy, and I will make sure that you get my contact info and Kerry's as well, because there's a lot more that I'd like to speak about.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay,
thanks.
So with that, I did want to bring up a couple of things that obviously APP is doing. So we've been out on the ambassador tour for the last, what has it been now, 5 weeks, something like that. It's been pretty long, anyways. This is our last weekend, right? And with the last weekend, we got to push and try and get more people out and get people engaged and let them know what we're doing with the ambassador tour. So on Friday, we are in Red Deer at the Baymont Conference Center, and that starts at 6 o'clock. And on Saturday, we're in Bingley Community Hall, which is basically about 15 minutes northeast of Rocky Mountain House. And that's in the afternoon. That's at 1:30. And then on Sunday, we are in Sherwood Park at the Y Community League Hall, and that's an evening one. That's at 5:30 as well. So if you can make it out for that, have Corey Morgan tell us what's going on in terms of his experience, his history with the independence movement and what's been going on. And he's definitely a great supporter of the Alberta Prosperity Project. And I don't know if he was a big supporter like maybe a year ago. I haven't had that conversation with him, but he definitely supports what we're doing, and the fact that we're kind of calling out what's going on politically and socially, and having these meetings with 100 people, that is worth its weight in gold. Because I've always said, it'd be great to have 500, 1,000 people out there. But you're getting the cream of the crop coming out to this. They're coming out, listening to what we say. They're buying memberships, or they are members already, and they enjoy talking with everybody else around them and spreading the word of being an Alberta Prosperity Project ambassador. So does that make sense to you, Chris?
I wasn't listening. I'm just kidding. Yes, yeah, it does. That's the whole point. As one of our dearest and nearest friends, Phil's pointed out, 90 viewers and 4.4 million Albertans. That's exactly why.
Yeah,
we launched the Ambassadors for Independence tour, because we need everybody out there to do their part and talking to their friends, neighbors, and even their enemies about Alberta independence, Alberta sovereignty. Yeah, we're not going to do it alone. It's going to take the power of exponential growth to achieve that. So we want to help you be able to have effective conversations with people on these subjects, not specifically, but including initiatives that we see coming down the pipeline that we know will increase our prosperity and our sovereignty in this province, like the Alberta Pension Plan, for instance.
That's right.
We need to be able to have these conversations. We need to be able to be effective. So that's the point here.
That's right. Connie asked, when are you coming to Northeast Alberta? Well, so over the last 5-6 weeks, we've kind of done quadrants, and I know
were there.
You guys were up in
Fort McMurray,
Fort Mac, and Lambert, and I think that was it for Northeast. I could be wrong, but either way, so this is the ambassador tour. We're finishing it off. Then we're going to kind of take a break for the Christmas holidays, and right back at it in January. And I believe we'll be doing an Alberta Pension Plan tour, I believe is what we're going to be calling that. And we're going to have speakers talking about what's going on with the Alberta Pension Plan, economists, and kind of the ideal way, I think, is to get a conversation going, maybe even a debate, to say, is it good to have an Alberta pension plan or is it bad? Right. And because you have to,
there you go.
I know it's good. That's the end of conversation. Good. But it's good to have those conversations as well, because not only that, like, we're talking about a whole bunch of different things. Mandates that we have for the Alberta Prosperity Project is to look at employment insurance, and to look at taxation, to look at policing, look at all these different things that we can do as a province in order to become like our own country. If we needed to become our own country, what do we need? Well, I guess we need military. We need maybe possibly our own currency. These are the conversations we have to have, and this is one of the reasons why I love the Alberta Prosperity Project, because there's a plan, and with that plan, it's great to talk about these things. Whether or not we implement all of them, or it's still good to have these conversations, because I'm getting really tired of talking with family and friends about what's going on with Netflix.
Yes. Yeah. What the heck is Netflix? To answer the question about when are we going to be in Northeast Alberta, I'll bring up two things here. First off, if you want Alberta Prosperity Project to do something in your neck of the woods, reach out through the contact on the website or through your whatever Alberta Prosperity Project chapter is closest to you, and organize with them. If you get the people together, we will come out there and we'll speak to you guys. We're happy to do it. So if that's a question you find yourself asking, when are you going to come up here? Don't just ask the question, make it happen, and we'll come up there. The second thing is, for the next week's webinar, we will be looking for sponsors. So if you or your business wants to sponsor one of our weekly webinars, please get in touch with us through the contact portal on the webpage, or you can reach out to Kerry or I directly if you know how. It's very easy to find our contact info. It's literally on the side of a giant truck. And yeah, we need that. We need your support. We need your help to make sure we can continue doing these things. So please do that. Both of those.
And since we're on the topic of what's happening next week, so we do these Wednesday webinars, of course, every Wednesday, unless something happens, then we decide not to do it on a Wednesday and do something else. But that's neither here nor there. But next week's webinar is with James Ragowski. I have to actually figure out how to pronounce that, who's a researcher, author, and natural health proponent, exposing the World Health Organization's hidden agenda behind their proposed pandemic treaty. James says, his quote is, "Out with the WHO and in with the new. So with that, you'll definitely want to tune in and hear what's happening with him. So
I like it.
I
Hopefully
do.
our friend Sean Buckley will watch that one, because he's a very avid advocate for natural health products.
That's right. That is true. I just want to do one last thing here, as we usually try and do. And of course, I have way too many things to scroll through. The shortcut, bit.ly/AB vote yes. Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So this is a very, very important initiative. We've realized at the Alberta Prosperity Project that it is unlikely that we're going to achieve a sovereign or independent Alberta doing the same things we've done over and over and over again, expecting different results. We failed to elect any independence party candidates in the last all elections. And what came to mind was the people. It's us. We, using our voices, are the ones that are going to accomplish this. So in Alberta, we have this thing called a Citizens Initiative Referendum. Now, what that means is on any issues that have constitutional issues with them, it requires a 20% threshold to force the government to hold a referendum. In this case, that's nearly 600,000 people. It's 580 some odd thousand people. So the kicker is, in order to do that, it has to be done within 90 days. Now, there's no way that within 90 days, we're going to gather 600,000 signatures and force the referendum. However, we can have you register your intent to vote or intent to trigger that petition. And once this number reaches the goal, we present it and we get that referendum on the table. Once we have the contact information, it's as simple as informing Elections Alberta. We get canvassers sent out there. They already know where you are. We collect the signatures, force a referendum. Boom, it's done. So this is how we empower our provincial government to negotiate our position with the feds. You don't want a microchip in your hand tied to an ESG score, tied to your international pandemic treaty and all that crap. Vote yes. Be prepared. The cost of not doing something today could be everything tomorrow. I don't think we can be more clear about that. The things that are coming at the federal level are not pretty. And if you're a freedom-minded individual and you want to be prosperous, that is not a path we want to go down. We need to be prepared. Right now in this province, we have a government that is very receptive to the idea of freedom. They believe in a strong and free Alberta. They believe in a prosperous Alberta. And we need to empower them to do their job and make law on our behalf in pushing back against the federal government. This is the way we do it. Yeah. So please.
And we definitely talk about this at the ambassador tour. We're definitely going to be talking about this every chance we can get on a soapbox. We will be talking about this. And bit.ly or bit.ly/AB vote yes. If you're at the Alberta Prosperity meetings, we're going to have QR codes on pieces of paper, which I think we all know how to use a QR code, despite the fact that we totally against them. But they're just a shortcut in order to get to this, so you don't have to type it into your browser. So bit.ly/AB vote yes. And then you've got that sheet of paper. Give it to your neighbor, give it to your friend, and get them to register as well. So.
Yeah, there's 14,000 people on there right now. If everybody went out and told one person tomorrow, there'd be 28,382 tomorrow.
Wow, great math.
I can do that. I'm a nerd. Okay, I'm also a tired nerd.
There we go. Yeah. So with that, thank you again for everybody watching. We do this every Wednesday, and we will definitely see you next Wednesday. And if we don't see you next Wednesday, we're definitely seeing you this weekend in Red Deer, Bingley, or in Sherwood Park. So with that, I'm going to say good night. And again, thank you so much to Randy for putting up with us. That was great. That was a great presentation.
Thank you, Randy.
It's okay. All right.
Yeah, everybody. Ben Shapiro's awesome. See you there tomorrow, maybe.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.